Welcome to a hopefully stress-free cat food chat with some very opinionated taste testers. We're going through what George and Eleanor have been eating lately, from budget-friendly pâtés to one of the most expensive cat foods I've ever bought, and covering the pros, the cons, why we have to have a very special bowl just for dinner, and why I think cat parents need to stop hating on certain ingredients. But just a little housekeeping before we get into the taste tests. First, I'm not a vet, I'm not a feline nutritionist. I am just a lady on the internet with two very picky cats, and I want to feed them well within my budget. So none of this is professional advice, and if you're thinking about making changes to your cat's diet, run it by your vet first. Number 2, George and Eleanor's ratings are based on how much they like the food, not how much I like it. They've got their own 5-paw scale, and spoiler alert, George has handed out more 5-paw ratings this month than ever before, so pat on the back for me because I picked out some winners this food rotation. 3, you do not have to feed your cats this many foods. The main reason I do it is because George and Eleanor are divas. They simply will not finish their food if it's the same thing for every meal. Number 4, all the nutrition info I'm sharing is on a dry matter basis. That's just a fancy way of saying the numbers show the food's nutrients without moisture, which makes it much easier to compare different types of food. And last, everything I mentioned today is linked in the description if you want to check it out for your own cats. Okay, let's get into breakfast. First meal of the day, no shocker here, is a Fancy Feast classic pâté, the chopped grill feast flavor, which is really just their chicken pâté, but I guess someone in marketing decided to give it a fancier name. It is Fancy Feast after all. If you've been following our food rotations, you might remember this one from about a year ago. Back then, George and Eleanor liked it, but they weren't head over heels for it. This time, they've been going bananas, like scarf it down, lick the bowl clean, meow for more bananas. I'm not sure if it's the break we took from it or if this batch has a slightly different formulation, but they've been obsessed for 2 months straight. Fancy Feast pâtés end up in my rotation frequently for a few different reasons, beyond just George and Eleanor loving it. First and foremost, they're budget friendly. This one's around 30 cents per ounce. Feeding a primarily wet food diet for two 13-pound Ragdoll cats gets so expensive. I mean, you'll see the price of their dinner when we get there. I just wouldn't be able to manage this type of diet without incorporating foods like Fancy Feast that are priced well. And despite being budget friendly, they've got a good amount of protein. This one is 48% on a dry matter basis. And the protein comes from animal sources like chicken, meat byproducts, liver. Those are all things I like to see in a cat food. Cats are obligate carnivores, which means they require meat in their diets to get adequate nutrition. That said, being an obligate carnivore doesn't mean that cats are incapable of digesting carbohydrates or plant-based products. I feel like that's a misconception that floats around. Studies actually show that cats can digest carbs, just maybe not as efficiently as protein. But if you are concerned about the amount of carbohydrates in your cat's diet, all the foods in this month's rotation are pretty low in carbs, below 5% on a dry matter basis. Other things I like about this chopped grill flavor in particular is that it doesn't have any fish, which is something I try to limit. Maybe it's in my head, but I feel like Eleanor's chin acne worsens when she's eating fishy foods. Plus there's the concern for mercury, heavy metals, so just a personal preference to keep fish in moderation for us. I like how widely accessible Fancy Feast pâtés are. On top of being able to order it online, if I'm running low and I need it in a pinch, I can always find it at the supermarket, at the local pet stores. It's everywhere. And last but not least, I think it's great that it's part of the Purina family. It's a big company, lots of research, board-certified nutritionists, vets, food scientists, decades of data behind their recipes. Say what you want about big brands, but that level of research is definitely worth something. That said, I've always maintained there's no one perfect food, so there are a few things that aren't ideal about this specific food. First is that there are artificial flavors. By no means a deal breaker for me, but I wanted to call it out because it might be something you're concerned about. And second is some vague ingredient labeling, like meat byproducts and liver, without saying exactly what they are. Could be beef, pork, heart, lungs, bone. We'll never know from the label. Unfortunately, this is something we commonly face with pet food. In fact, unspecified byproducts are in our lunch too. But I'm comfortable feeding byproducts like this, and I'll explain why they're not as scary as they sound when we get to lunch. Overall, I love this food. My cats love this food. I am so sad we'll have to stop feeding it soon because I don't want my cats to grow tired of it. I cannot tell you how many times I've ruined a food they're obsessed with by feeding it too much, and then they never want it again. I cannot let that happen to this chopped grill flavor. Moving on to lunch, George and Eleanor are having a SHEBA Paté. They're getting this savory chicken entree. This is so dumb, but listen, I love the snap sound it makes when I pull apart the containers. So satisfying. In terms of nutritional breakdown, it's pretty similar to the Fancy Feast pâté from breakfast. just a teeny bit lower in protein and carbs and a teeny bit higher in fat. But I mean, these numbers are pretty much the same. Eleanor is a SHEBA fiend. This chicken and the beef one are her top picks right now, which is shocking if you've seen that old clip of her as a kitten throwing a tantrum over beef pate. Apparently, she's matured. A lot of the things I liked about our breakfast are the same things I love about this SHEBA Paté. It's got a good amount of protein that comes from animal sources, in this case, chicken and poultry byproducts. It's affordable. If you get it in the variety packs, it's 36 cents an ounce at Chewy. It's another fish-free recipe, although if your cat has fish allergies, I should note it does have fish oil in it. Fish oil is a great source of omega-3s for cats, so if your cat doesn't have allergies, we're all good there. What I really love about this food, though, are the portion sizes. George and Eleanor hate leftovers. Hate leftovers. It doesn't matter if I warm it up. When I have to pull a half-used can out of the fridge, it is drama and food gets wasted. So these SHEBA Patés are great because they come in little twin packs with small portions of around 1.3 ounces. And it's perfect for us. 1, for calorie management, and 2, to avoid waste. Downsides to this food, and this is a very silly complaint, but sometimes the juices get on my hand when I open the packaging. My tip is you gotta open it facing down and directly over the bowl to avoid messes. Another thing that might be an issue for some people is that it has artificial color, and I'm sure some people will also say the tapioca starch is a red flag because typically that's an ingredient associated with foods higher in carbs and lower in protein, but it must be really minimal here because the food is only 4% carbs on a dry matter basis. I'd only steer clear of tapioca starch in a food if the protein was low, and that's not the case here. That's one of the reasons I think it's so important to take a step back and evaluate a food as a whole rather than pick apart every ingredient. Ingredients alone don't tell you the nutritional composition of a food or the digestibility of it. They're just bits and pieces that play a part of the whole formula designed to give our cats the nutrients they need. And speaking of nutrients, this brings me back to the discussion of byproducts. So we have a little more clarity with the byproducts in this food because we know they're poultry, but aside from that, we don't know the exact makeup. My take on byproducts is that they get an unfair bad rap, and I think that needs to be fixed. So let's start with what they actually are. The Association of American Feed Control Officials, or AFCO, the group that sets nutrition standards for pet food in the US, defines meat byproducts as non-rendered, clean, edible parts of mammals other than muscle meat. So that can include organs, blood, bone, fatty tissue. And here's the thing, when a premium food label brags about beef liver or beef heart in their recipe, those are byproducts. They're nutrient-dense parts of the animals that cats actually need. They're not hair, hooves, teeth, garbage scraps. You know, the word filler gets thrown around a lot to describe byproducts, but filler implies no nutritional value, and byproducts are the opposite. Bones, for example, provide minerals like calcium and phosphorus. Organs like liver are packed with vitamins A, D, and B complex. And these aren't waste products either. In many cultures, humans actually eat them too. They're simply not muscle meat. You know, we say we want our cats to eat like they would in the wild, but guess what? Wild cats are not carving out a filet mignon and tossing the rest. They eat the whole animal. They're eating what we would call byproducts. Now, some people worry about unspecified byproducts because the label doesn't tell you if you're getting mostly things that are perceived as good, like heart and liver, or things perceived as bad, like fat and bone. And that's a fair question, but instead of panicking, I'll say it again, I like to take a step back and look at the food as a whole. So ask yourself, does the nutritional breakdown show a reasonable fat level that follows recommended guidelines? If yes, then the fat from the byproducts isn't a problem. Concerned about too much bone? Check the phosphorus and calcium numbers. Most brands will give you that info if you ask for it. If those levels meet the needs of your individual cat, you're fine. The most important thing to remember, in my opinion, is if the food label says it meets AFCO's nutritional guidelines for your cat's life stage, which every food in this video does for adult cats, that means the recipe is balanced, including whatever byproducts are in it. Your cat is getting complete, appropriate nutrition. So I'm totally comfortable feeding George and Eleanor byproducts. The reason that I put vague byproducts as a negative in these reviews has less to do with the nutrition and more to do with flagging it for cats with allergies. It doesn't matter to me if the byproducts are pork or beef because George and Eleanor don't have allergies that I'm aware of. But if your cat does have allergies, a food like Fancy Feast or SHEBA might not be the right choice for your cat because you don't know if they'll be exposed to a protein they have an issue with. That's the biggest problem, in my opinion, with vague labeling. Hopefully, talking about all this helps reduce any anxiety you might have around feeding your cats. I think there's a lot of conflicting information out there and some fear-mongering as well, and I'd love to dismantle that bit by bit in these videos if I can. Okay, on to the last meal of the day. It's dinner time. You'll notice I've got different bowls here. These are slow feeders, which I've linked in the description. You'll see why we need them for this meal once George and Eleanor start eating. This center is one of the most expensive foods I have ever fed my cats. It's a Feline natural pate, the chicken and venison feast flavor, and it's about 80 cents an ounce on Chewy if you buy it in these larger cans. I think it's $1.12 per ounce if you buy it in the smaller cans. It's more than double the price of our breakfast and lunch selections. So is it worth it? I hate to say this, but yeah, it is so worth it. You look at the nutritional breakdown and it's 57% protein on a dry matter basis, which is awesome. We love protein for our cats. The ingredients list is clearly labeled with things like chicken, chicken heart, venison liver, and it's pretty neat to have a different protein source like venison. Doesn't necessarily mean venison is better for our cats than plain chicken or beef, but it's a nice unexpected way to add some variety into a diet. And my cats obviously enjoy variety, because I think this might be George's favorite food of all time, which is why we're using these slow feeders. George is so obsessed with this food. He eats it so quickly that when I was feeding it in our regular bowls, he would finish way earlier than Eleanor and then go over to her bowl and start eating out of it while she was still eating. So then she would get stressed and eat way too fast and regurgitate her food mid-meal. Just a mess, you guys. So these feeders have helped slow everyone down. George isn't as likely to steal Eleanor's food, and since Eleanor is eating more slowly, she isn't regurgitating anymore. And yeah, Eleanor gets hers put on top of a plastic shoebox because the elevation helps with the regurgitation as well. Whoever said cats are low maintenance have not met mine. Anyway, back to the food. Other things I like are that Feline Natural makes all their nutrition info readily available online, so you don't have to go through the process of reaching out to customer support if you need more info. It's also nice that this recipe doesn't have any gums in it. Gums aren't bad, they help with texture, help bind ingredients together, but sometimes too many gums in a food can make cats a little gassy with some digestive upset. George has had a sensitive stomach since he was a baby, so it's something I try to stay on top of. As far as the negatives, obviously it's the expense. It's one of the reasons I won't feed this food too often. Poor George and his expensive taste. It's also hard to find. You can get it on Chewy, which is great for me. I love Chewy, especially since they have such a good return policy if your cats don't like the food, but you're not going to find it at your other pet stores, really. And lastly, the texture is a little funny, and I don't know how to describe it. It might be because it doesn't have gums, but it's not as smooth as other pâtés. It's finely ground, but it's almost drier or chunkier or something. I mostly notice it because if I don't mash it down well or spread it really thinly, Eleanor would just swallow huge chunks whole, and that also led to our regurgitation issues. Overall, it's just a really great food that I'd love to feed more often, and that I know George would like more often too. And that's our current rotation. We've been on it for almost 3 months, so I'll be switching it up soon before they get bored. When we have a new menu, I'll be back with another rotation review. And if you want to see George and Eleanor judge more foods, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.